welcome to the new series, Meta Thursday, where we every Thursday gonna look at the meta. We're gonna talk about the decks, we're gonna talk about their matchup, and everything that you should know about the current meta state. So let's look at it. Let's start with the elephant in the room, and let's start with a deck that I made a deck guide on yesterday. It is Morgana Galio. Currently probably the best deck to climb with. If we look at the stats, it's still keeping the win rate, even though it tripled the play rate. It's something that we have not seen in the game for a long time now. Some people kind of try to now beat it with things like elusive, as we can see with things like Teemo Yuumi and Grand Zed. So I wouldn't be surprised if the call is to now cut complete Mehra and just go for like 2 BaJAtak builds, so you're a little bit better into these like elusive win cons. Outside of elusives, the only real deck that beats it currently is Mordekaiser Morgana. So if you want to beat this deck, Mordekaiser Morgana is definitely an amazing call. Things like Soulharvest are very effective into it. But overall, if you want to learn this deck, as said, I made a deck guide, so you can definitely check it out. Second deck that I have for you today is Zed Gnar, a deck that is so similar to the deck that we used to play in open beta with Zed Fair. It's the same concept, just play Omen Hawk into Dog, into Sorian, buff up your elusive, and then just with multiple elusives, kill your opponent. Also with things like protective spells and things like Sky Splitter and Voodoo Style, as well with combination things like Will of Arena and Vinciga to give you so much tempo. This deck has pretty good matchup table. It does pretty well into a lot of decks. It doesn't do the best into things like Morgana, because Morgana is very good counter to this deck because it stops you so much in your development and stuff. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. But especially the version that I'm showcasing today has like 60% win rate, and overall it's pretty impressive. But I do think that there is still some work to be done on this deck list. But overall, this deck still shows very interesting numbers. So I do think it's still something maybe worth exploring, especially in the sense of like nostalgia as well. Next up, we have the classic Recorrect style deck, the classic Overwhelm, a deck that I'm mentioning basically every week now, and it's a deck that is just so powerful and it's still stable. The ratio's a little bit changed from the last week. It went a little bit more aggressive because I think that's currently the call. I think the meta is a little bit better if you go a little bit more aggressive with it. As well, one Butterfree. I think Butterfree got a little bit better, especially into things like the Galio deck that we already mentioned. It has 73 good matchups, 27 bad matchups. And as mentioned, I have the guide on this deck as well. I think this deck is something that if you haven't yet, I think you should be learning it, because I think this deck is here to stay. And this deck is gonna be meta relevant till it gets some nerf, I think, because it's just doing so powerful things. Next up, we have Jhin, a deck that is coming back to the meta. If you haven't seen this deck before, it's about pushing as much damage as possible in early game. Then on turn 4, on turn 5, be able to stun multiple units with things like Sunhawk, Stageant, and Pirouette. And then finish up your opponents with things like Experimentator, Fire Splitter, Level 2 Jhin, Fervor, things like Might, or like Demolition. It's just, finding the rest of the damage and just killing your opponent. This deck just got so much better because a lot of decks that are currently around are pretty greedy. Things like Mordekaiser Morgana, right? Karma Set, I don't know, things like Gnar Zed, right? Other than gonna win. This deck are just greedy, and this deck just punishes them so well with especially the double stun on the turn 4, turn 5. And that's something that it does amazingly. Also, something worth mentioning is that it's beating a little bit the Morgana Galio. So that's a pretty good thing to have, that you are not worried that much about the best deck currently in the meta, that you are fine to playing into it and you can even beat it. As the last deck, a deck that I mentioned last week, and it is Teemo Yuumi, a deck that, once again, as any Jhin, punishes a lot of greedy decks. And also, it's doing pretty well into the Galio Morgana, so once again, you don't have to worry about this big deck that is currently in the meta, that just destroys the meta currently. So it's an amazing thing to have in the mind, that you're not only beating a lot of decks, but you're also doing decently, or even a little bit beating the best deck in the format. If you haven't seen this deck before, it's just about elusive, going wide, then using things like Yuumi, Heroic Refrain, Eye of the Storm, or Bundle Testo into Heroic Refrain to buff them and kill your opponent then with things like Blowback or Mystic Shot as the final burn. Amazing deck, a deck that we have in the meta for months, and deck that is extremely powerful. The purpose of the rebrand is not only that I can update the name as well, the thumbnail, as well, having just some weekly series that when it's gonna get released, where I can update you on the meta developments, and then, point out you to some of my deck guides where I can maybe go a little bit more in depth about the decks. Leave your opinion in the comments, and thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, leave a subscribe, and see you in the next video.